Hi, I'm Derek Johnson, President and CEO of the NAACP, and I have with me today the President of UPS Foundation, Ed Martinez. Welcome, Ed.
Hi, Derek. Good to be here with you.
Good. So we are convening for our 111th annual convention, but unfortunately, we are unable to do it live, or in person, I should say. It's virtual. So this is definitely a new norm. So Ed, I wanted you to tell me, how are you as head of UPS Foundation adjusting to this new norm?
Well, Derek, first of all, I just want to thank you for having me with you. You know, out of your long, storied history at the NAACP, UPS has partnered with NAACP for the last 48 years. And so I think that although today we're inhibited in many ways by COVID and our racial injustice challenges, we find a way to talk to each other. You and I have spoken over the last several months, and I think that's the strength of partnerships. While we are separated in distance, and perhaps can't be together as we are every year, we always find a way to communicate to advance our communities.
Yeah. So, not only are we in the midst of a health pandemic, we're also in a different place in terms of race relations in this country. As a result of George Floyd, many people are now opening up and recognizing that structural racism actually exists, and there is a need to accelerate diversity and inclusion in the corporate workspace. What are some of the things that UPS is doing, have done, or plan to do?
Well, Derek, racism is an insidious disease, and there's really no silver bullet. There really isn't. And UPS and the UPS Foundation has always taken a multiple front approach. I think that we understand that we need to work with our people. We need to work with our communities. We need to work with our business partners, our suppliers. We need to advocate to eradicate racism from our society, from really our global society. So we've essentially reinvested in partnerships like ours, reinvigorated how we speak to our people. We're holding more town halls. We reinvigorated how we're working with our supplier diversity programs, how we're working with small minority women-owned businesses, particularly in the Black community. And I think something that we've done and we've really underscored is our advocacy. Fighting federal anti-lynching laws or encouraging them, encouraging hate crimes bills at the state levels, making sure that we are always advocating for diversity and inclusion in our communities.
UPS is one of those unique companies. I have friends who, from college, worked at UPS part-time, and they have gone on with their careers, and some of them actually are still working at UPS part-time. And it's amazing to me that you find so many people who've had opportunities through the UPS corporate environment. What do you attribute to that? And why do so many of UPS employees stay there so long, 32 years, 38 years? Why do you think that's the case?
Well, Derek, that's a great question for me. I started with the company when I was 16 years old. I was a sophomore in high school, and this is my 44th year with the company. And we felt very strongly about having a promotion from within policy and really creating a workplace that everyone feels like they belong, that everyone is inclusive. Now, we have 500,000 employees, and we're certainly not perfect, but we go out of our way to make sure that our people are onboarded correctly, that they're developed properly, that they're promoted, and that they have long careers with the company. And I think that one of the ways that I, as not only Chief Diversity and Inclusion Officer, but also President of the UPS Foundation, is really showing the heart of the company to our employees, showing them how we have partners like you and like the NAACP, engaging them in the field. And that's something that you and I have talked a lot about, because part of our philanthropy is not just what emanates out of Atlanta, Georgia, and our corporate headquarters, but really engaging our people with their community partners like the NAACP and others, National Urban League, and many others, so that they can make a difference in their own communities. And I think when you add up all of that, I think employees have a natural attraction to stay on with the company.
So how does that translate in terms of your procurement diversity? How does that translate in terms of board representation or your C-suite diversity?
Well, we have strong diversity at our C-suite. In fact, David Abney, who is our former CEO that you've met on several occasions, retired from the company. And we have Carol Tomei, who took over the reins of the company this June 1st. A very, very talented and capable lady who really took the reins at a time when we've been faced with multiple crises. And the first order of business was to step up our actions around equity and social justice. She said, if we're not safe, no one's safe. And that's one of the things that we've created in response to the social injustices. She has ordered the creation of a task force. And that task force is really picking up where we are working in basically procurement and supplier diversity, and making sure that we set appropriate goals that we're meeting not only in procurement and supplier diversity, but also in working with multicultural customers and women-owned businesses, particularly those in the Black community.
You know, typically around this year, we'll be coming on the back end of our convention. But embedded in our convention is the AXO competition. And for so many years, UPS have not only supported AXO, but your workers have volunteered to help carry out the AXO competition. Why are you invested in doing projects like that?
My goodness, our kids are our future. And if there's one activity that I will tell you that UPSers fight to be a part of, and that's the AXO competition. We have to nurture, our children. The NAACP has always created this wonderful competition that brings the most talented kids in the world together. And that's something that is very near and dear to us, because we know the children are our future. And we need to set the example. We need to eradicate barriers that are set up by systemic racism. And that's one of the ways that we help do that.
So final question, Ed. If you had a silver bullet, what would you do to change the corporate environment to have more diversity and a more representative decision-making management team within UPS?
Well, I tell you, we pride ourselves on measurement and reporting. We're a company of 500,000 people. And so I think that we continuously work towards knowing and understanding our talent. And when you have 500,000 employees around the world, that's one of the things that keeps me up at night, because, leadership has a sphere of vision and really depend on others to bring forward talent. We are instituting technology advances that now give us the visibility of all qualified talents. But that's one of the challenges that I always think about is we've got so many talented people, and making sure that we know who they are, where they are to bring them forward is always a challenge with a big organization.
Yeah. So any final thoughts or comments you would like to share with our delegates this year?
Well, I just want to congratulate the delegates because I think that the governance of the NAACP, the leadership, the board are so important to longtime partners like UPS and the UPS Foundation to know that you continuously have an impact in our communities. We call ourselves a doorstep company. And I think that the NAACP is a doorstep organization. You're on every corner and every neighborhood in America. And so are we. And so that's why we have such a great fit together. And like you and I have talked about many times, you've got my cell number, I've got yours. For us, our partnership is from the leadership to the front line. And that's what makes our partnership so special, is that you can pick up the phone and I can pick up the phone when we need to do something together and when we need to do something about something else. And I just want to thank all delegates for your continued support. This has been probably the most challenging years of our generation, but I think that we are stronger together.
Everyone knows Brown and they love when you deliver the package. And I'm sure a lot of people would like for you to deliver us out of this 2020 reality into a new reality that's 2021. Thank you for your partnership. I think you are perhaps the oldest continuous corporate partner that the NAACP has. So we really appreciate the long-standing relationship we've had. Have a wonderful rest of 2020, and let's look forward to a 2021 that's much better than the 2020 we've seen over the last 8 months, 9 months.
Here, here. Together we can do that, Derek. Thank you so much for having me.
Take care. Thank you.
NAACP members, friends, and supporters, I bring you greetings to the 111th NAACP National Convention. I am Juan Cofield, a member of the NAACP National Board of Directors and president of the New England Area Conference of the NAACP. I think it goes without saying that this is our first virtual convention. I'm so proud of the NAACP officers, other members of the National Board, trustees of the NAACP Foundation, and to our hardworking staff who've had to change the course and plan for this virtual convention with only a few months' time. The program will make us all proud of our association. This is such a perilous time for the world, for our country, and for the communities throughout this country. We as NAACPers have a key role to play right now in shaping world events, in shaping our nation's events, and in shaping the condition of the communities that we live in. If we bring out the vote on November the 3rd, like never before, we can change the course of history. We can help elect a president, a very capable president, who will put the nation's interest first and foremost in every decision that he makes. And this will make a huge change for the destiny of our nation. Then our nation will be positioned to change the course of world events. NAACPers, the power is in our hands. Black and brown communities did not come out to vote in 2016 as we did in 2012. The political scientists did not make that up. They were right. We simply did not come out to vote as we should have. We, this time, must ensure that Black and brown communities vote in record numbers on November the 3rd. Think about it. This is an awesome position. We have the power in our hands. This convention will provide you with the tools and lighten the pathway for us to make a difference and change the course of world events. I ask that you leave this convention knowing that we have the power in our hands. I didn't hear you. Please repeat after me. We have the power in our hands. Thank you so much.
Good evening, fellow delegates and alternates. My name is Hazel Dukes. I'm chair of the National Nominating Committee. I will be presenting rules for persons who would like to be elected to the board of directors. The deadline to receive consent forms for a candidate to the National Board of Directors at the National Convention will be September the 18th by email at ballot@naacpnet.org no later than 10 a.m. For candidates wishing to make speeches, the official nominating speech reservation form must be submitted to the chairman of the election supervisory via email at ballot@naacpnet.org no later than 10 a.m. on Monday, September the 21st, 2020. Nominating speeches will be no more than 3 minutes each and no more than 1 seconding speech of 1 minute. These videos should be sent with the complete nomination speech reservation form and submitted via email at ballot@naacpnet.org no later than 10 a.m. on Monday, September the 21st, 2020. Only a certified voting delegate to the National Convention may place an individual name in nomination or second a nomination. Qualification: NAACP Constitution, Article 4, Section 3. Any member in good standing of the association who has been a bona fide member for at least 180 calendar days prior to the date nominations are made, and who has not been an employee of the association or any of its units during the 2-year period prior to the date nominations are made, and is affiliated with a local unit, shall be eligible to be nominated, elected, and serve on the board of directors. Consent forms may be requested by email at ballot@naacpnet.org by submitting a request for consent to the Election Supervisory Committee. Consent forms may be requested from the Election Supervisory Committee by email at ballot@naacpnet.org. Following the chairman's address on the opening session of the convention on Sunday, September the 13th, 2020, to be considered by the committee. All consent forms must be submitted no later than 10 a.m. on the Monday, September the 21st, 2020 deadline. Election Supervisory Committee receive consent forms and petitions email at ballot@naacpnet.org. Voting shall be conducted by secret ballot before the annual resolution session. Voting will commence on Saturday, September the 26th. All voting delegates to the convention are eligible to vote and will be authenticated through the process assigned for registered delegates. The nominee who wins 50% plus one of the ballot cast will be declared the winner. Any voter needing assistance will be assisted by a member of the Election Supervisory Committee or designee.
I'm Joanne Jenkins with AARP. As the coronavirus continues to affect us all, especially older people and those with underlying health conditions, AARP is here, actively supporting you and your community. Every day, we're providing updated information and tips from trusted sources. We're hosting weekly teletown halls with the nation's top health experts, advocating on your behalf with national and local lawmakers to help secure sufficient resources to meet people's needs, sharing tools to protect you and your family from fraud, and creating resources for family caregivers everywhere to help keep them and their loved ones safe and healthy. For more than 60 years, we've been here to educate, serve, and fight for older Americans. Today, you can count on AARP more than ever. Join us. We may be apart, but we don't have to be alone. Stay connected at aarp.org/coronavirus.
I'd say Fidelity is the best place to start, not just start your career to work. They care about you, not just as an employee, but as an individual. And they're committed to not just bettering your career, but bettering you in the long run. And to leave and go anywhere else, I couldn't see myself doing that. I feel like when it comes to my suggestions, they're actually pressed for and I want to hear all about it, because there might be things that I think about that no one else has put forth. And hopefully what I can contribute will be better in the long run, though my ideas may or may not be applied to what's going on. And then I know they really want to hear what my ideas are. Coming to Fidelity, I knew that there were people I can get involved with to volunteer or get active in many different groups, but I didn't know they had all these different ERGs or employee resource groups that catered towards so many different backgrounds, like individual disabilities, the African American community, veterans. I could join with one, or as many as I wanted to get involved in these different communities and give back in my own way. But it makes me feel included and to be a part of a community and a company where my ideas are heard. I can definitely say I wouldn't want to be anywhere else. Everything that I've learned has made me feel as if I'm better prepared for my career, but also the individuals that I've met and made me feel as if this was the best choice for me.
Good evening. I am Robin Williams, member of the National Board of Directors and National Chairperson of the Labor Committee. Thank you for joining us for tonight's conversation, Labor and the Workforce, Leveraging Our Moment. As the current call for racial justice is echoed nationally, the role for organized labor to be a partner in the fight against discrimination is even more critical. Now, with new Black leadership in key roles, the work is organizing, funding, and advocating for economic justice. This panel of esteemed labor leaders will explore synergies, best practices, and the role of labor in such unrest. Let's get started.
Thank you so much, Robin, for giving us this opportunity to be here. I wanted to say that I am the Reverend Terrence Melvin, the president of the Coalition of Black Trade Unionists and Secretary Treasurer of the New York State AFL-CIO. And before we get started, it is my pleasure to be here with you tonight. I want to give a shout out and a thank you to Chairman Russell for allowing us this opportunity as labor to be here and the partnership that we've shared. I want to also give a shout out to my brother from another mother, the CEO and President Johnson, for all the great work that he is doing to lead this great organization to higher heights. Now, we have with us today an esteemed panel of Black labor leaders from around this country. And we didn't, when the NAACP put out the call, they didn't just put out the call for anybody to come. They wanted the top brass to be here. And we have brought the top brass to be with you today. I'm not going to try to go through their bios, because if I did, the whole hour would be gone, because they have all done so much to get to where they are in this labor movement. But I'm just going to introduce them as to who they are and where they sit today. First, we have this great, vibrant labor leader, the new president of the National Education Association, my sister, Becky Pringle. It is so good to have you here with us this evening, Becky. Also with Becky and I, we have a long-term force in the labor movement, strong woman labor leader that serves as the Secretary Treasurer of the American Postal Worker Union,
the one most of us call her Mama Liz, Liz Powell herself. Good to have you with us today, Liz. And then we have a very strong brother from the United Auto Workers, the Secretary Treasurer of the United Auto Workers, and also Vice Chair of the Labor Committee of the NAACP, none other than Brother Ray Curry. Ray, great to be here with you today. Then we have the brother that I call the thinker in the movement. One that I call on in time of need, when I just need something to just go through and just to pause and get me straight on what's going on, to look at the big picture of things and bring it home for me. And that is my brother, the Secretary Treasurer of the Service Employees International Union, Jerry Hudson. And I know I changed up the lineup for him, so they're going to get me later on. Last but not least, and I'm holding for the end, the president of my union, the president of the Green Machine. And that is none other than Brother Lee Saunders himself, that has been struggling and working in this movement for a long time. And with all his many caps, he also heads the political operation of the National AFL-CIO. So Lee, thank you for also joining us this evening. I want to jump right into our program today. Don't want to spend much time chit-chatting because we got a lot of things that I want to try to cover in a short period of time. You know, first, as Black labor leaders, we find ourselves in a very interesting position. We spent our entire careers trying to address the racial inequities in our labor movement. We fought hard to get a seat at the table, and even harder to be heard once we got to the table. Well, my first question is, looking at where we are now, this movement, this moment that we're at now, what has your union's response been to demand for justice for Black lives? I want to start off with my sister Becky on this one. What has your union's response been?
So first of all, thank you, Terry. It's good to see you again. Thank you, Robin. I can't wait till I can see you in person. It's so good to be here with Ray and with Liz and with Lee and with Jerry. And thanks and congratulations to the NAACP, not only for what I know will be a fabulous conference, but most recently for your leadership on the lawsuit against Betsy DeVos. Wow. Thank you for that leadership. We know that as she tried to use this pandemic to further her privatization schemes to destroy public education, for the NAACP to step up and to file suit and to win, I cannot tell you how much that means to our members, to our students, to our communities. Great job, President Derrick. So you're right, Terry. You know, the history of the labor movement is not one, actually, it's one that reflects the history of this country, right? We were, as Black people, were not included in this country. You know, we had the poetry of the Constitution, we the people, but we know that we were not included in this country in any way from its founding. And that was not different for the labor movement. We know that we had to have separate labor organizations that were formed. Frederick Douglass, of course, for the first one way back in 1850, the American League of Colored Laborers, because Black workers weren't allowed to join the white unions. Of course, A. Philip Randolph came later, and he was the founder of the Brotherhood for Sleeping Car Porters, a proud union that my grandfather belonged to, and it was the first one to be chartered by the AFL. So it's been a long, checkered history with the labor movement. But this we know, and this is true regardless of whether you're white or Black or Latino or Indigenous. When you belong to a labor union, you know that that's going to elevate your economic status. We know that not only did it help workers rise up into the middle class, but specifically Black workers, it cut poverty rates by half. So we know how important it is to have labor unions, but in this moment, this is an opportunity for Black labor leaders to really stand in our power and to center the work that we are doing around racial justice. At the NEA, we are leading with race, and that's not an easy thing to do in a union that is predominantly white, but we are courageously educating our members, all of them, to take a journey with us of awareness, not only on racial issues in terms of challenging themselves on their implicit bias, on ensuring that they are steeped in restorative practices, making sure that they are prepared to lead on racial and social justice issues, but we're also having them understand that there's a connection between movements. And so, Terry, when you talk about the economic status of workers in this country, we know that as a labor union, we must take on economic inequality. We know that it impacts our Black communities more than any other community. And we know in the education space that all of that impacts whether our students are able to learn. We know that our Black and brown students have been devastated by COVID-19. They have been impacted disproportionately, that we know that they did not have access to the internet already. This is not new, that the inequities in the system impacted them to a greater degree than other students. When we had to, on a dime, turn to virtual learning, we knew that they didn't have the tools, they didn't have access to the internet. All of those things impacted their ability to continue to learn. And then, of course, they were more impacted by the disease, and we lost more people than in other communities. And so at the NEA, what we have focused on is making sure that our members have the professional development they need so they can not only fight for safe schools, but they can fight for equitable schools, for just schools, that we can actually use this moment, not just to, Terry, we're not just looking to stand in the gaps for our students right now, but I'm asking all of our members to lift up their heads and to design to design actual solutions now that deal with these inequities in a systemic way so that we can change the funding of our schools, so we know that our students, Black and brown students that have suffered from inequities forever, can finally realize those racial and socially just and equitable schools, so all of them, everyone, can live into their brilliance.
Thank you so much, Becky. I want to now hear the same question from Brother Ray Curry. What has been your union's response to the demand for justice for Black lives? Brother Curry.
Brother Terry, it's great to be with you this evening, and also great to be with this esteemed group of panelists that we have. Our union has a long history of having been in the struggle with civil rights, having been one of the folks that was on the podium and the stage of the day of the March on Washington. We have continued that advocacy, and our belief is our voice must be heard. Our voice must be heard in injustices that are taking place in this country. Our voice must be heard in inequities that are taking place in this country. Our voice must be heard in providing equal access to a number of different folks and communities. And COVID-19 not only proved that in disparities and healthcare opportunities that were available for so many, but we've seen so many disadvantages and disparities with the way treatment is taking place for so many others. We know the names of so many that have been affected by the unequal justice and treatment out in the communities. But at the same time, we need advocacy for that. It's a very interesting piece that we find ourselves now lobbying, advocating, having messages, doing news press releases and other items about laws and other issues that we passed 50 plus years ago. We're trying to enforce those laws at this point in time, and they're strategic to what takes place and being able to move another generation. We've lost some great leaders in the process, but at the same time, we're enforcing rules and legislation that was passed by them. We've tried to keep things positive, and we want to be on a positive note. We support the protests. We support those protests, whether they're taking place in cities, they're taking place nationally. A number of different ones have taken place. But the key piece of that is echoing that message that we all are in this together and that our memberships collectively are in this. We have a larger footprint and space by being international unions and being advocates of working men and women all across this country in so many different sectors. And we can bring that voice to a larger platform, whether that's with our elected officials, whether sitting in a town hall meeting, now even socially distanced in our own local communities. But we must make sure that justice is equal for all. We can't have the scales of justice tip the other direction so many more times as we see so many lives lost, as we see so many individuals that go unprosecuted, as we see so many miscarriages that are missing in our communities. It's got to be a level playing field. And labor has also often, so many times, when you think about back in history, the advocacy for labor and the opportunities that labor brought a lot of people of color into the middle class. That opportunity wasn't always available. And we need to make sure that that opportunity continues to be available by enforcing the laws that are on the current books and also making sure we protect individuals and making sure justice is served.
Thank you so much, Brother Curry. Liz Powell, need you to answer that same question from APWU. What are you guys doing? You need to unmute.
Yes, that would help, wouldn't it? Good evening, everyone. My thanks to Chairman Leon Russell, President and CEO Derek Johnson, the National Board of the NAACP, my sisters and brothers who are on this panel with me this evening, including the moderator. The Constitution of the American Postal Workers Union succinctly states that we believe that all members of labor have the right to economic, political, and social justice. Postal workers are in every community across this country. And we have been in a struggle where those communities have stood with us in our struggle against the Postal Service. And we, of course, have to stand with our community in their struggle for racial and social justice. Martin Luther King Jr. said it well when he said, "Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere." My national convention is the highest governing body within my union. And in 2016, we passed a resolution that said the APWU will encourage all of its members to participate in any rallies, petition drives, or other actions pursued by the campaign against racial discrimination and for transparency in policing. We were proud to join the Caravan for Racial and Economic Justice by the AFL-CIO. Postal workers have been on the front lines in the fight for racial and social economic justice, human rights, labor rights, and most of all, this pandemic. And we stand with our sisters and brothers in whatever struggle that they may be involved in, because when it affects one, it affects us all. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Liz. Brother Saunders, President Saunders, and what are we doing, the Green Machine?
Well, let me answer the question in a couple of different kinds of ways, Terry, if I could. The first thing I believe that the labor movement must do, and it's priority number one, is to take advantage of the times and organize workers like never before. 65% of the American public, according to the most recent Gallup poll, shows that people believe that unions are absolutely necessary to improve the work lives of workers all across this country. So we've got to practice what we preach, and we've got to go out there and we've got to organize in the private sector, in the public sector, because when we do that, it has an impact on our own communities, in the Black community and communities of color. Because when you have that seat at the table, then you can improve your wages and healthcare and retirement and working conditions. So that's got to be priority number one, bringing people into the labor family. Jerry Hudson knows this very well, my partner from SEIU. We just came off of a major victory in the state of California where both unions jointly organized 43,000 child care workers. First time ever. They've now got the right to collectively bargain, and they have the ability to be represented by these two strong unions. Those 43,000 childcare workers, predominantly women, predominantly people of color. So that's how we improve the economic status of workers all across the country and improve the economic status of African Americans and people of color. Now, let me go to the second portion of my answer. We have a proud history within our union, within AFSCME, of being a part, just as with the UAW, as being a part of the civil rights movement. Everyone knows the story about the 1,300 sanitation workers in Memphis, Tennessee in 1968, who went on strike for not only dignity, not only to be represented by our union, AFSCME Local 1733, but they were demanding respect. They were demanding a seat at the table so they could deal with the economic challenges that they faced and their families faced in the city of Memphis. And everyone knows the story. We went on strike. Those 1,300 African Americans went on strike in the city of Memphis, in a segregated city where people believed that those workers had no dignity. Well, they demanded dignity and they demanded respect. And everyone knows that they carried those signs that said, "I am a man." And Dr. King understood the importance of linking civil rights and human rights and labor rights and economic rights together. They don't stand alone. And that's why he traveled to Memphis, and he ultimately gave his life in supporting that strike in Memphis, Tennessee. We've got to continue that struggle. We've got to continue that fight because it's never ending. But we've also got some work to do within our own labor movement. And each union represented here this evening, I believe, and the entire labor movement has got to take an inward look and say, what are we doing right? And what are we doing wrong as far as promoting racial justice within our own ranks? So we've been doing that for quite a while now. We've had some very deep discussions about what we've got to do. We represent in the public sector every occupation that you can imagine, and that includes law enforcement, police, corrections officers, probation, and parole. We honestly believe that they deserve to have a seat at the table as well as other workers across the country. And that seat at the table is very important because that provides us the ability and the opportunity to sit down and talk about our differences, to sit down and talk about what kind of country we really want to live in, to talk about the issues of racial injustice, of police brutality, to talk about those things, educate our own members, and develop an action plan to deal with it. So the challenges are great, the challenges are many. We've still got a long way to go. We still have a long way to go based upon what's happening in this country right now. But we play a pivotal role, meaning the labor movement plays a pivotal role in getting the job done and moving this country to racial justice.
Thank you so much, Lee. Last but not least on this question is my brother, Jerry Hudson. What is the Purple Machine SEIU doing in this area?
Oh my God. As I listen to all the distinguished members of this panel, my head has gone in a lot of different directions about this. Answer one is you should know that back in June of this year, our union made a decision that it wanted to back the protest that was going on all around the country with the movement for Black Lives. You should know in some ways that movement for Black Lives is not something outside of SEIU for me, because a lot of us rode alongside of the development of the movement for Black Lives, starting with Trayvon Martin's murder, then moving to the murder in Ferguson, Mike Brown. And we've watched this movement kind of being birthed. We participated in its development over the years. So when it gets to the point where we're talking about what happened this year with George Floyd, we were already in deep conversations with the movement for Black Lives, right? So when they sprung up and had their demonstrations all over the country, we decided we wanted to pass a resolution in support of the movement for Black Lives. We've raised money on its behalf, which we've sent to the movement itself. We started a conversation like Lee. We have law enforcement inside of us, right? They're not some other people's members, they're our members, right? We started a conversation with them and other public safety officers to have a real deep conversation about the way in which systemic racism informs the way in which these institutions operate. And we said, look, our mission as a union is to root out racism in our society. We believe that racial justice is absolutely essential to achieving economic justice. If you can't figure out a way to remove the impediments of race and gender from the way in which workers come together, then they don't have the power that they need in order to, in fact, be effective instruments of workers' power. And so for us, this whole issue of racial justice is a big issue. We took it on. We forced all of our institutions. You know, there's a whole racial justice journey like the one that Becky is talking about in NEA. Well, it's inside of SEIU. It's a long journey that we are taking everybody on, right? That you cannot get to. You cannot get to economic justice without racial justice. You cannot do it. In which case, how do we begin to root out among ourselves some sense of how racism deforms our actions, in some ways colors the world that we're in? How do we do this? And that's an ongoing live conversation that goes all the way down, you know, to all of the different, I would say, all of the different local unions inside of SEIU, but inside of those local unions, all of the different kinds of members that we represent. We represent members that are Latinx, we represent white members, we represent them all. They're all involved in a racial justice conversation inside of SEIU now that is deepened over time. And it, in some ways, colors how we show up in the movement for Black Lives and everything else, right? So we're there. We are partners in that battle. It ain't an easy struggle, right? Again, Lee says, we represent law enforcement. We insist that they take a look at the way in which systemic racism colors the practice of policing in this country. But we also say back to the movement for Black Lives, you know, police are, you know, members too, right? In a funny way. They have a right to membership. They have a right to that, but union membership can't be used as a way to, in some ways, block you from, you know, prosecution around criminal activity. And so it's touched off a huge kind of conversation, which Lee and Becky and I'm sure Ray and Liz and everybody else is seeing how that it plays out. It's a complicated conversation, but we are obliged, I think, in this moment, to in some way stay in these conversations, lift up the ways in which policing inside of our own communities has been fundamentally unjust, has been racist in huge amounts of things, and has resulted in thousands of people's lives. We believe that we got to involve ourselves in that fray. We can't be outside of that fray. And we believe that our involvement in that battle in some ways is an involvement that is essential to our future and how we organize and how we think about the world. And so for me, this is a moment. It's an amazing moment where the COVID-19 crisis meets the ancient American racial virus, right? That in some ways we are now struggling with both sides of those viruses, right? That the COVID-19 virus, and then inside of it, the more ancient racist virus that is infected and informed the whole country. We believe we have to be in that fray. We have to be in that fray and organize as much as we can to protect our members' lives, protect our community members' lives, protect Black, Brown, API lives in this moment.
Thank you so much, Jerry. I mean, what I'm hearing is that we have an awesome responsibility in the labor movement to elevate this moment into the greater movement that we're in. And we have a responsibility to do that as a labor movement. The question I want to ask, the next question I want to ask on that train of thought is, what do you see, and I want to ask this to both Becky and Lee in that order, what do you see the role that Black labor leadership should play in ensuring that resources are given to organize more people of color to build the political power that we need in this moment, in this movement, and going forward? We'll start with you, Becky, on that.
So I want to kind of pick up where Lee started. It's basic organizing 101, right, Lee? We had lots of conversations between our unions post-Janus when that Supreme Court decision went against us. And we realized that it was those one-to-one conversations that we had to have, that we needed to listen to our members, we needed to hear them. We needed to create space in the union movement for all of our members, especially our younger members. And we needed to demonstrate that we were relevant in this moment. And I will tell you, Terry, as we surveyed many of our younger members in particular, and we found out where their passions were, it was around racial and social justice issues. And when they saw that that was absolutely a pillar of our unionism, that we, the NEA, the National Education Association, was committed to, they realized that this was a collective power that they could actually become a part of and become leaders in. When they saw that the NEA was willing to allocate resources to this work in a big way, actually, Terry, racial justice in education is a strategic objective in NEA's strategic plan and budget. We elevated it to that level because we understood that if we didn't put our money where our mouths were, we weren't going to actually make the difference. We weren't going to transform ourselves internally. We weren't going to have the resources to prepare our educators to become better practitioners and to lead in the movement and in the association. And we weren't going to have the resources we needed to do. And this is the other point I want to make. As I look at the faces of the panelists who have joined me, and you'll hear me talk about this a lot this evening. It really is all about that collaborative work we're doing together. So building those strong and deep partnerships among our labor partners, but even broader than that, and within our communities. Because here's the thing, we know that this is a systemic issue. And for us in education, it is a systemic issue through all systems. All of our social safety networks absolutely impact whether our students have that ability to learn. We know that we have to ensure that we have the power, we have the resources to train our members, to have them be leaders, and this is important, we also have to use our political power. We have to have a clear agenda for those folks who decide that they want to run for office, whether it's at our school board level or all the way up to the White House. We have to have a clear agenda about how they are steeped in racial and social and education justice. And we have to have that roadmap. And that's what we spend our time doing. We, as educators, also know that every decision that's made in our classrooms is a political one. And so we've encouraged our members to run for office. I don't know if you know this, Terry, but in the 2018 election, we had over 1,200 educators run for office, and 70% of them won. Because we understood that we had to be in those positions of making those decisions. And those leaders we trained, and we trained them steep steeped in racial, social, economic, and education justice, so that when they got to those positions of power where they were making decisions for our children and our classrooms, for our work sites, for our community, for our communities, for our community colleges and institutions of higher education, that they were making decisions based on equity and access and opportunity.
Thank you so much. Lee?
Let me just add to what Becky said. We really had to take a real hard look internally at ourselves within AFSCME to determine what was working as far as organizing or dealing with the issues that confront our members across the country. We had to fix the things that weren't working and really be honest about delving into why things were broken within our union. So we made a commitment that we were going to develop a program that re-engaged our members based upon the challenges that confronted us really over the past 8 years. I mean, especially in the public sector, we have been under attack like never before, where collective bargaining is under attack. We are now in the public sector completely right to work because of the Supreme Court decision, the Janus decision. It was an AFSCME decision coming out of Illinois that Becky mentioned. So we had to reconnect with our members all across the country. So we made a commitment, not only the national union, but our affiliates across the country, rolling up our sleeves saying that we've got to start talking to folks again. We've got to engage in communication and not talking at people, Terry, but talking with them and listening to what they had to say, meaning our members. How can we improve? How can we engage them in the activities of the union? We had more than 1 million one-on-one conversations with our members across the country. We never thought that program, we called it AFSCME Strong, would explode the way that it did. But members were anxious to talk to us. They had ideas. They had ways to improve not only the servicing for themselves, but how they could create more power within their union and within their communities across the country. Based upon that process, based upon AFSCME Strong and talking one-on-one with those million folks, we created a core of young activists, people that really had not been involved in the union before, but they wanted to be involved because they knew that this was a way to gain power, to gain economic security, to gain retirement security, to gain better health benefits. And so they volunteered. They wanted to become activists, not just members, but activists within their union. And one thing, and Becky mentioned this, when you're bringing young people into the fold and listening to them, but also mentoring them and teaching them, one of their major issues that they want to talk about is racial justice within this country and economic justice and linking those together. So you can't ignore those facts. That expands our horizons, okay? So we started talking more seriously about those issues by having training programs, bringing conferences together of our members across the country, talking about those real issues and what we must do about them. We also developed the Next Wave program because we had so many people, young people coming in and being sponges, wanting to learn more, wanting to do more. And we developed the Next Wave program for our young members to train them to become activists and leaders, elected leaders within their own unions, okay? That benefited our members who were people of color, African Americans, because they saw an avenue and they saw a way to move forward, And then the third thing that we did was we developed a program with African American college students from historically Black colleges and universities, where we bring them in and we have an internship program every year, where we expose these young people to the labor movement. We expose them to the work that we do. And we try to grab them when they're either sophomores or juniors so they can go through a 2 or 3 year program with us in the summertime, organizing, involving themselves in political action, communications, research, and collective bargaining, so they can understand what we do and what we're about and make the connection. And maybe, just maybe, they say, well, we want to be a part of that action too. And we try to guarantee that either they will have a job with AFSCME after they graduate, or we'll place them within another union or a progressive organization to continue that work. That is a commitment that we have made, and we'll continue to make those kinds of commitments. That's how you grow, I believe, this movement.
Thank you so much, Lee. I mean, what we're talking about, what I'm hearing here is that we do have a responsibility as Black labor leaders to help move and help make space in this movement. I heard a lot about young folks. It is clear, every study shows that over the next 10 to 15 years, the workforce in this country is going to be majority minority. However, we have not been reflective of that as a whole in our movement. So it's good to hear that we're looking at that. I heard Becky talking about reaching out to her young members, and I heard Lee talking about making avenues for young folks to come into the movement. I know, Jerry, you have done a lot of work over the years of bringing young people, young ideas, fresh ideas into the movement, knocking down some barriers. So I want to just lay it on you right now. What do we need to do from your point of view? You heard some stuff that Becky and Lee said, but from your point of view, what do we need to do to engage and recruit young people of color into this movement? What does it take?
So from my point of view, there is no way, in fact, to sustain organized labor if you're not in some way trying to figure out how to organize, recruit into leadership younger people. It's just it will die. And so in every piece of how I think about the work I do, I'm almost always in some sort of conversation with younger people about it. I mean, how we wind up in the movement for Black Lives, it ain't an old man like me who took us there. It was our young people who went out into Ferguson and the rest of it and dragged old people like me along to sort of say, okay, we're going to address this and we're going to address it differently. In doing that, as I sit with those young people in those rooms, that is about leadership development, right? It is saying, guys, what do you think? How do you want to think about this? And working with them. I don't believe in me being the old man bringing the wisdom, blah, blah, blah. I am who I am. I sit in rooms with a whole lot of young people always and have decent conversations with them about how it is they want to think and organize in the world. What we did in the movement for Black Lives is emblematic of what I think we do in a whole lot of other spaces. You and I have traveled all the way to Africa and elsewhere. Along the way, we brought young people with us in those battles and struggles, right? For me, you can't sustain the movement if young people ain't in it. And when they come in it, they come with their own sets of ideas and we gonna have to battle with it. I never come in saying, well, whatever you say goes. Of course, whatever you say it go. But a whole lot of what you say might go, and it might take us in some directions that I really, really never would have imagined. That's what I think the movement for Black Lives was for me. It took me in places where I really just didn't imagine being. And in the process, I watched a number of young leaders just develop out of that process. And so for me, I'm always working with young people. I'm always conscious of how much I need them, right? and then have a real battle with them about their development and mine. I am not the same person I was before I met them, right? It's just they changed me, I changed them. We create something that in some ways I think helps to build the movement going forward.
Thank you so much. I mean, that is so powerful, and that is what we all have to be doing. I'm hearing this around everywhere I go, and it's so refreshing to hear it from you leaders that are here today, that we know that we have to invest in our young people. We have to meet them where they are to bring them where we think they ought to be, or in some cases, for them to bring us where we need to be. So thank you for those words. Let me change the subject a little bit. I want to go to Sister Liz this time. I want to ask a question. We have seen over the last months the issue, and Lee brought this up earlier. I think Jerry may have spoke on it too. But the issue of police unions, and should police be in unions, and what's the role of police unions, and what should they be doing? What is it from your response? From your point of view, Liz, what is the responsibility of Black labor leaders in regards to police unions? What should we be doing? Lee done gave us a little bit, Jerry gave us. From your point of view, Liz.
Yes, Terry. We've had several meetings. Several organizations have had several meetings and came up with different ideas on what to do and what not to do. But we believe that rebranding and controlling the narrative of the role and influence of police unions is very important. There needs to be a way to balance and support the structural premise of police unions, but not the bias into structure that is contributing to blatant disregard of accountability within their own ranks. There needs to be a collective commitment, specifically from Black labor leaders, whereas acts of brutality and loss of life cannot and will not be supported by any labor union. A discussion on this subject matter without any real meaningful substance and or a concerted call to action that demands changes is only perpetuating the problem. The current call has to be changing the political landscape with elected officials who look like communities they represent, holding elected officials accountable, and demand they either draft or support legislative language that strengthens job securities, even the playing field in ways that impact Black workers to secure positions with and without higher level education or trade. And make sure that labor is included as a panelist in all discussions on the subject matters that include job security, equality, and economic justice. Drafting and acting on the policy statements that represent attainable and impactful objectives. And we do that by partnering with other labor leaders and organizations who have those same thoughts, same missions, and same interests at heart and in mind.
Thank you so much, Liz. Brother Ray Curry, as a Black man, and you know, I still talk about this wherever I go. You know, I'm a little older than I used to be, but I still am in a position where when I'm riding down the street and I see a police car, something happens inside of me. Something moves inside of me that I don't think it should, but that is what happens. And I'm over 50. I ain't saying what my age is, but I'm getting up there. But that should not happen, right? That shouldn't happen. As a Black man, as a Black union leader on this issue, where should we be as it relates to police unions? I mean, I've heard President Saunders say that there is not a contract that gives anybody a right to kill anybody, right? But where should we be as Black laborers, as a Black man in the movement, where should we be on this issue?
Melvin, I think President Saunders probably said it best, and his message is clear. There's not a collective bargaining agreement that gives anyone that authority. We actually do not represent police officers. We actually represent some jailers and correction officers in a couple of locations, a very minimal number with regard to our overall membership. But the fairness, equality, justice pieces, all those things are relevant. And somehow we've got to convene an authority together to be able to get that message across. I think you're talking about a situation where we're going to circumvent the rules just because someone's in law enforcement. We're going to circumvent the rules because someone is in a situation that they've got a relationship. We're going to circumvent the rules because they're related to the mayor. We're going to circumvent the rules because they're tied to an elected official. We can't circumvent the rules. The rules were never meant to circumvent. And if we pursue the legal remedies and enforcement of justice against the average citizen that's out here, why can't we pursue those same legal remedies when that same action is taken by an individual just because he's got a uniform on, just because he's got a badge on? It doesn't change the rules. If there's not a chance to have equal fairness in a process, we are allowing individuals to perpetuate a never-ending battle with regard to taking lives, never-ending battle with there's no consequences for their actions. We're hearing in some of these cases now that some of these individuals, they were multiple offenders. As we know some of those, we might have called those in some regular work sites frequent flyers. They may have taken progressive discipline steps. Some of the steps now that were missed, action was required. And as a result of it, the key piece that we've got to remember in here is when we don't take action, we allow an individual to create another problem in the long term. In some of these cases, these individuals, when action wasn't taken, discipline wasn't rendered, we allowed these individuals later on to actually take a life. They were no longer just taking a simple discipline piece that was offensive. Now they've taken a life. And now we're still trying to ask the question, are they subject to the justice system? Are they subject to prosecution? We've got to remember, if we're going to treat the average American citizen that way, for the same charge, same effort, we've got to treat law enforcement that way. I also still believe, and there's been a lot of discussion with labor around this, there's got to be a chance that labor collectively comes together and labor speaks as one voice to this issue. I think Lee made one good point about what happened so many years ago with regard to the civil rights movement. And there were not so many international unions that were collectively there. We have to educate, and we did. Over time, we have educated, and collectively, we've got more now. When you think about what happened in the 50s and think about where we are now, we have more individuals and labor leaders speaking out for social justice and speaking out for reforms than we did have 50 plus years ago. 50 plus years ago, we had more communities that were speaking out on that issue. But now we've got the leaders that are collectively on a page. And when we speak that way, we are speaking stronger because we're speaking in greater numbers and we're speaking with a larger voice.
Thank you so much, Brother Curry. Lee, I kind of threw you in earlier. I don't know if I totally misquoted you or if I was right on the money. Just want to give you an opportunity if you wanted to weigh in on this, the issue of policing.
Let me just tell you a story very quickly, and then put things into perspective. I spent 4 years in New York City from 1998 to 2002, heading up one of our major affiliates there, District Council 37. It represented 125,000 public sector workers. You know this very well, Terry. At the time when I was there in 2019, in 1999, okay, I was there from 98 to 2002. In 1999, there was a young man named Amadou Diallo who was murdered, literally murdered and shot many, many times. I think the number was 16 or 17, if I recall correctly, by the police in New York City. It was wrong then, and it was wrong now. We staged, and the unions in New York City staged a march across Brooklyn Bridge to say that it was wrong and that kind of violence must stop. Big rally that we had when we crossed the bridge. We had a big rally at City Hall. The next week, I had a Central Labor Council meeting, and the head of the PBA, the Police Benevolent Association, wanted to take me on. And he said that I wasn't a true trade unionist because I was attacking his members. And this is what I clearly told him. I was born Black. I became a trade unionist later. Okay? That was wrong. And I still feel that way, and I will always feel that way. I've got 2 boys. You know, I'm two men now. I've got 3 grandsons, ages of 6 to 4 months old. And I'm concerned about their health and welfare every single day because there is police brutality and Black Lives Matter. And we've got to start doing something about it rather than just talking about it every single day. We've got to recognize that there is a real problem with policing. And I will say that not only to my non-law enforcement members, but I will say that to our law enforcement members. And let me tell you something. And I know that Jerry has been through this because I've talked to him about it. I mean, these are some real difficult discussions, some very difficult discussions, because you're really putting stuff on the table. And you're saying that things must change, that there is systemic racism in this country, and we've got to deal with it. That there is police brutality in this country, and we've got to deal with it. We've got to create ways and measures to guarantee that, for the most part, it doesn't happen. And we've got to have a seat at that table. And that's why I think it's so important, Terry, that labor plays a role in this, because we do represent law enforcement. We represent workers in every occupational group. And the benefit of doing that is bringing sometimes very divided opinions together and sit down and talk about the issue and talk about the problem. And then sometimes, just sometimes, you reach an agreement on how you should move forward, and you educate folks about what the reality is in the African American community. And then you develop a plan and a program to deal with those realities that are confronted with every single day. That provides an avenue for us to have that discussion. That table is so important. If we say that you don't belong, that you shouldn't have that seat at the table, then we're saying that we don't have to have, or we can't have the kinds of discussions to try to remedy the problem. And that's what we're trying to do internally. I mean, having those real hard discussions. Let me tell you something. People get angry. They get mad. They want to fight. They want to cuss you out sometimes. Okay? But we've got to have those discussions. And then what we've got to do is, once having those discussions, we don't want this plan, or we don't want the strategy or the program to sit on a shelf and collect dust. I am tired of having all these conferences and meetings about what we know is reality, but nothing is being done about it. It is time. It is time to implement, and sometimes even to force change, because we know what's wrong and we know what's right. And we've got to be activists, and we've got to speak in the powers that we have as elected leaders within major unions all across the country. We have a responsibility to speak out when there is an injustice, period.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Lee. Thank you for that insight on that. You know, I mean, I could honestly, 5 of y'all are like my favorite people in the movement. I could sit here and talk to y'all all night long. If they would give us 2 more hours, I would be here with you, because there's so much knowledge in all of you and so much that you guys have done for us in the movement individually. I could just stay here all night, but we're going to have to start wrapping up. So I want to do a round robin, if you will. Give everybody a minute and a half or so, 2 minutes to tell me, each one of you are from a different sector of the labor movement. And what I'd like to hear from you, and we're going to start with Becky, what is the top issue or issues facing your members today in this environment? What are the top issues? We'll start with you, Becky.
So, Terry, in 2015, 5 years ago, the 10,000 delegates to our national convention committed the NEA to taking on institutional racism because we knew that racial justice is education justice. 5 years later, I am proud of our affiliates, our states throughout this country who affirmatively have said that Black lives matter. That is a huge shift for us as an organization. And so as we face the reality of the safety of our members and our students and our communities who are being bullied into going back to in-person learning by the President of the United States, we are standing up with them and for them. We are using everything at our disposal, from grassroots action to legal action. Yes, we brought lawsuits, to political action, as I said before, because we have to fight to make sure that our students do not return to schools until they are safe and they are equitable. And so we are standing with them, ensuring that we are lifting up our voices and we are there at the table making those decisions so they do not open if their infection rates are not low, if they don't have PPE, if they don't have sanitation, if they can't test and trace, if they don't have plans to keep our students and our educators safe. And Terry, we have to do everything grounded in equity. The preamble of our NEA mission says that we, the members of the National Education Association of the United States of America, are the voice of education professionals. Our work is fundamental to this nation, and we accept the profound trust that has been placed in us. Our children, our babies are depending on us to be worthy of them. So we are going to keep them safe, and we are going to lean into this moment and ensure racial, social, economic, and education justice.
Thank you so much, Becky. I want to thank you so much for those comments, and thank you so much for the work that you're doing. I want to move over to Jerry Hudson at this time. Jerry, what are the top issues facing your members at this moment? In this movement?
The issues facing our members are, we're in a pandemic, folks. We're in a pandemic that has cost the lives of 196,000 Americans. Inside of that pandemic, we're in a moment when in order to control the virus, we've had to lock down the economy itself. Never completely locked down. That's why we're in the trouble we're in. Right? How we survive and thrive beyond this pandemic is order one for us. In dealing with that, we don't believe we can, in fact, get control of the virus until we get 45 out of office, right? And so for me, at the moment, almost every waking day of my life is spent in trying to figure out how it is we, in fact, build as big an opposition to Trump's presidency and elect Joe Biden to the presidency. That is like mission for all of the reasons you would imagine. Right? Democracy is on the ballot. I would say beyond democracy, racial equity is on the ballot. All of those things are on the ballot. And so for me, prosecuting the campaign that in some ways rids our country of what we now have in the White House is mission one, critical, has to happen. If we don't do it, almost everything else we care about is in danger. So for me, that's the issue of the moment. How do we seize back our democracy in this country on behalf of working people and deeply. Our people, my people, right?
Thank you. Thank you so much, Joe. Appreciate that. I'm going to ask the same question of Brother Ray Curry at this time. What is the top issues facing your members?
I would have to say that I'd be echoing some of the same things that Becky and Jerry have already referenced. Right now, we've got so much strong advocacy that's out there, but without change that takes place from the top, and that change is going to be echoed down through all the leadership chambers across this country. Without that change, we can't see true movement in the near and far future. That piece is a challenge for us. Our members are working during a pandemic. Our members were considered essential workers. Our members were faced with the Defense Production Act. Our members were faced with a number of different things that they've never seen in this history. Now, they can read stories about that, and they know the history from great-grandparents and many generations before. But we're at a point right now where we need those things, and it starts from the top. We're advocating right now every possible effort to get out and vote. We're advocating every possible effort to vote safely. We're advocating every effort to vote early as much as you can. That is a key piece for us. Without that, we don't see the changes. 3 administrations have been there, administrations that we've supported, and there's been bickering and different things back and forth between the different halls of Congress. And we argue that there's not been an infrastructure bill that's been put in place. That's a piece that moves our industry and moves our membership in a number of different sectors that we work. But as the pandemic piece has also affected a number of our memberships, we've also seen our members who are in the gaming industry. We're seeing our members now that are in higher ed that are faced with, for the very first time, postdoctoral students. They're not on campuses. We're doing virtual learning. There's an extension from what took place this past spring. So we're working in different environments. And all of us know that are on this panel, we thrive our best when our memberships are able to come together. We collectively are able to have great exchanges together. Right now, we're finding ourselves working in a virtual world, and we're actually still achieving some great things. But without changes in leadership and directional changes where we can see real improvements, we can't be here advocating for those things and someone else is leading this country in a complete opposite direction. There can't be advocacy for social justice and change and someone is encouraging it or inciting something else in complete opposition to what we're proposing, what we're asking for, and what we're saying collectively we all are standing up for. And as one piece, if there's anything else that's out of this collective group in this panel is one that has definitely said a key piece, and that is about advocacy. We still have got to be the voice, but we can't be the voice. We can't be a planner. We've got to be able to show it all by action. And if we can't show anything, November 3rd, we should definitely be demanding between now and then that we're going to do everything possible to exert that effort and make sure that our voice is heard. Not talking about planning, not talking about opportunities, but the first step in making sure that something happens.
Thank you so much, Brother Curry. Mama Liz Powell, what is the top issue facing your members?
I wonder, as we watched the television over the last few weeks, have we watched the newspapers? We watched the struggle of the American Postal Workers Union with support from each and every one of you, those out there that's listening to this, the NAACP. We are undergoing a trying time with the PMG, Postmaster General, with 45 as he's called, and a new form of voter suppression that has no color to it. And I say that because he wants you to think that it is not safe to cast your ballot by mail. We encourage the vote by mail. And that's it. Our members don't know if they'll have a job tomorrow, if they'll have a job next week, because we know that it is his intent, as several postmaster generals prior to him has made a sincere attempt to privatize the United States Postal Service. So our members are concerned, and we appreciate all your support in making sure that we maintain a public, viable postal service that belongs to the country and not to any of them. Thank you again for this opportunity. Everybody be safe, stay well.
Thank you, Liz. And last but not least, President Lee Saunders, what's the top issues facing your members?
Well, I will say this, and many of you have heard me say it before, every election cycle, that this is the most important election of our lifetime. Well, I really mean it this time. With the pandemic, with the economic downturn, it is impacting disproportionately communities of color and African Americans in particular across this country. It is up to us, and the labor movement has got to play an important role in mobilizing and educating and organizing our members and our communities across the country. I want to give a shout out to the work that the NAACP is doing and going into the communities in the targeted areas. And we are working very closely with them. As a matter of fact, we announced this week that we were doing joint radio ads in targeted cities across the country in minority communities to urge people to understand the issues, to educate themselves, and then mobilize their communities. And just as important, get out the vote in November. We must do that. We cannot take this for granted. People died. People died for the right to vote in this country. Just ask John Lewis what he went through. But he caused good trouble. And we've got to cause good trouble. And we've got to engage our young people. We've got to engage our communities across the country to make sure that they come out in November and not only participate in the national elections, because that's extremely important. And we've got to make our voices heard with all of the attacks that are taking place in our communities across the country. But we've got important down ballot races also. We've got state legislative races. We've got gubernatorial races. We've got mayoral races. We've got city council races. We've got school district races. We've got the Senate and the House. We've got to engage in all of those elections by organizing our communities. And we can't do it in the final 2 weeks of the campaign. We've got to be there now. As a matter of fact, if we aren't there now, we've got a problem. We've been organizing in communities, in African American communities, in conjunction with some of our partners, year round, where we don't stop. And we use community organizations within those targeted areas where people know who they are. And you can, at one time, knock on doors. Can't do that now, but we've got to have some digital programs now. Well, maybe we can start sooner or later. But you've got to have a presence in those communities where people see you. They know who you are. They recognize why you're there. They connect with you. We've got to connect like never before. We got to connect our communities. We've got to connect our young people with our seniors, the public sector worker with the private sector worker, and say that we've got to make our voices heard. That's our responsibility. If we do that, and work like hell, then we can make a difference in November and we can win.
Thank you so much, Lee. I just want to mention something that my godfather in the movement, Bill Lucy, said at a recent leadership meeting that we had at CBTU, going along with what you just said, Lee. He said, we have always told you, and I've told you, that this was the most important election we were having. And he said, we lied to you because this is the most important election in your lifetime. We lied before, but this is it. And listen to us now, because this is the one. We must get someone with a conscience in the White House. We must get some people in the Senate that has a conscience and a belief in the country and the people of this country. I've been around here long enough to remember when we disagreed on party lines, but we believed in the spirit and the heart of this country. That ain't there today. So we've got to, I agree with all the panelists, top issue is to change the demographics of who's in power in this country. Put a conscience at the top of the country. And we can do that working together. Now, let me tell you, we have went overtime. I know they're ready to kill us because we went well over with the time we were supposed to be. But look, this was some powerful information that you guys were given, that we gave out tonight. And I want to thank my panel that was here: Becky Pringle, President Pringle, Secretary Treasurer Liz Powell, Secretary Treasurer Ray Curry, Secretary Treasurer Jerry Hudson, President Lee Saunders. I want to thank you for not just being here, but for your steadfast leadership in the movement. You guys make us proud every day. When I look out and I can see Black folks at the top of the movement, they're not just sitting in seats, but is making things happen. You make me proud. And I thank you for all that you do. This brings to an end our conversation that we're having for this portion of the NAACP convention. I want to thank you all for taking the time to join us. I hope that you found this conversation as enlightening as I have. I hope that you
fed my spirits, brother.
The virtual convention. Please stay safe, wear a mask, and don't forget to vote in November. We must vote, we must vote, we must vote. Good night, and God bless each and every one of you.